payment to Stormy Daniels. So we should expect some pushback from the defense team for Donald Trump about exactly what some of that language looks like, because frankly, it is complicated, and it's going to be up to these jurors when they go in to deliberate for what could be several days to determine whether Donald Trump, in fact, violated each of these 34 felony counts. And so that is what we expect here this afternoon when the two parties re-enter this courtroom with the judge. We know that Donald Trump has gone back to Trump Tower here during this effectively longer lunch break, but we're told that he will be returning here this afternoon for that charging conference, guys.
Von Hillard, thank you so very much. Let's bring in MSNBC anchor Lawrence O'Donnell, who's been inside the courtroom all morning. Lawrence, it's always a pleasure to see you. Well, what'd you see?
Well, this morning began in a really unusual way. Yesterday, of course, had that explosive situation where the judge ordered the courtroom cleared. Clear the courtroom are words that most people working in that courthouse have never heard in their lives. That's how rare it is. I asked a retired judge who was actually in the courtroom yesterday observing how many times he had to clear the courtroom in his career, and his answer was, as I expected, 0. I spoke to court officers today who said they have never cleared a courtroom before. They've never had to do it. And so one of the striking things about the way we began today is there was a massive presence of court officers in the room. There are usually 5 to 7 court officers standing around the room as a protective measure for a former president of the United States. You would not have that many in a normal trial that did not include a defendant like this. Today, that show of force by the court officers was at least doubled. Many of the higher-ranking officers were there. They're distinguishable by the white shirts, the sergeants, the captains. It was a stunning sight, and I could only wonder what it meant to the jury, because there's not much that changes in a courtroom. In fact, from day to day, for a jury, nothing changes. The visual picture of what's in front of them never really changes. The only thing that changes is there's a new witness, and that's about it. And here they came into a courtroom that had these court officers posted all over the room in positions they hadn't held before. And so the jury's left to wonder, what was that about? And over the course of the first hour, that presence was reduced, something closer to normal, but it was still a striking thing for that jury to walk into today.
Right.
And in terms of testimony, it really was the defense's chance to the prosecution's chance to cross-examine Robert Costello in a way that he clearly was not ready for. Yesterday, one of his signature lines was, "The email speaks for itself," when he was asked about his emails. Today, what would happen is the prosecutor would read a really bad email for Robert Costello and then just say, "The email speaks for itself, right?" And in this instance, Robert Costello's answer was sometimes, and he would change it up. And one of those emails was Robert Costello writing about Michael Cohen, who he was claiming was his client as a lawyer. Michael Cohen said he was never Robert Costello's client. But Robert Costello, in that email, in writing, calls Michael Cohen an asshole. And this was a very important point to reveal, because Robert Costello's testimony was, "My only interest was Michael Cohen. I was only working on behalf of Michael Cohen," when in fact he has an email in which he says about Michael Cohen, "What should I say to this asshole? He's playing with the most powerful man on the planet." And so the prosecution's point was Costello's interest was in the most powerful man on the planet, and he was there in every moment with Michael Cohen trying to protect Donald Trump.
I'm wondering, Lawrence, if you had a chance to look at the jury during Costello's testimony and whether there was any reaction, if you could see them from your vantage point.
You know, this is as professional a jury as you can get, and it's an odd term to use with amateurs who've never done something before. But I was in the front row of the reporters section, which meant I was 2 rows behind Donald Trump Jr., and there was another row of Trump supporters, official Trump supporters in that other row. So I had a very, very close view of almost all of the jurors. No one has an unobstructed view of all of the jurors. And you can never read anything from them. You cannot read impatience. You cannot read confusion. They are always attentive in the direction they're supposed to be attentive, sometimes attentive to the questioner if the lawyer is asking a longer question. But most of the time, their heads and their eyes are turned to focus on that witness stand, to take out of that witness stand what they can without ever giving you a clue of how they are processing what they're taking out of that witness stand.
Lawrence O'Donnell, always a pleasure to see you. I very much thank you for being with us this morning, and make sure to watch more from Lawrence O'Donnell tonight on MSNBC, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on MSNBC.
And let's bring in our legal correspondent, Lisa Rubin, along with New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig, who've also been inside the courthouse all morning. You two have been inside the courthouse throughout this trial. Today, the defense rested. The jury has been set home now for the next week until they return. Lisa, what stuck out to you, and what do we need to know about how this proceeds now?
Well, let's start with what stuck out, Anna. Susan Hoffinger performed one of the most masterful cross-examinations that I have ever seen, and particularly effective today. It was so effective in part because, as Lawrence just noted to you, she played off of something that he said yesterday, that the email speaks for itself, which is something lawyers say and not witnesses. But then she continued to return to it as a trope when he fought her characterization of things that had happened, and yet they were betrayed by the actual documents that he himself had written and sent. Instead of trying to force an admission from him, she would just say, well, Mr. Costello, the email speaks for itself, doesn't it? And that was really interesting and almost fun to watch. But the other thing I want to convey to you and our viewers is Bob Costello testified unambiguously yesterday that not only was Michael Cohen his client in his mind, but that the person in whose interest he was acting was always Michael Cohen. Well, Susan Hoffinger showed him an email today that Bob Costello wrote to his partner, Jeff Citron, in which it says, tune into CNN and see how they are playing this up. This is during a period of time in which people thought Cohen might flip, and there were those in the former president's world who were almost antagonizing him to do so. And Costello continues, he has to know this. Just he continues to slow play us and the president, as if his interests and the president's, meaning Donald Trump's interests, are aligned, not that his interests are always in conjunction with those of Michael Cohen. Bob Costello was revealed today to be the person that he has always been, a person who was much more interested in money and pleasing Rudy Giuliani than he was in doing right by Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, the best thing he ever did, and perhaps the truest thing he ever did, was suss out who Bob Costello truly was and to be suspicious of him even while he strung him along for information.
Yeah, Susan, how did you see it?
You know, when I think about Costello, I'm sort of stepping back and just wondering why they called him. It seemed like maybe the client wanted him there because there's just so much animosity about Michael Cohen, and they wanted somebody to get up on the stand and attack Michael Cohen, and it wasn't going to be Donald Trump. But I just wonder how much damage they did with the jury on this. I mean, they really did. I think, you know, from their perspective, they landed some hits on Michael Cohen. On the last day that he was up, they got him to admit that he had stolen from the Trump organization. Those are things that sit in the jury's mind. But then right away, we had a hard start with Costello, and it really went off the rails yesterday. And now the jury's out for a week. And what they're left with is the final thought isn't Michael Cohen and what happened there, and is Michael Cohen a liar, and how much of his testimony can we believe? They're left thinking, at least in part, and the last person up was Bob Costello, and what happened there, and what was that all about? So that was sort of what I'm thinking about is we watched the jury leave the courtroom today.
So,
for a week.
Suzanne, do you think Donald Trump was happy with Costello's performance or, you know, answers?
I think you can never know, but I would imagine that he is. Yes, I think that he wanted somebody to get on the stand and attack Michael Cohen, and he got what he wanted from it. And I think you have to remember there are two things going on here. There is a criminal trial and a court proceeding, and then there is political theater that's going on to my left and in front of me and even in the courtroom, with all of Donald Trump's surrogates coming in. So, today they were playing, I think, or not even today. Today they're playing to the political theater, but I think Costello figures into that rather than what was good for the trial and what was good for Donald Trump in the courtroom. He was good for Donald Trump, the candidate.
Yeah, and just wondering, Lisa, what is good for Donald Trump? The candidate may not be best for Donald Trump, the defendant. How do you see the defense today?
I'm sorry, Jose, can you ask one more time? I'm having trouble hearing you with everything that's going on here.
You were talking about the masterful role of the prosecution today, right? How did you see the defense's role?
How did I see the defense today?
Yeah.
Look, the defense wanted Bob Costello on the stand to say that Michael Cohen is a liar. But in order to believe that, you have to also believe that Michael Cohen, at some point in his interactions with Bob Costello, was telling the truth. That means, in order to trust the defense's portrayal of events, that when Michael Cohen, for example, told Bob Costello he had nothing on Donald Trump in April of 2018, he was telling the truth then. That means they believe that Michael Cohen is capable of telling the truth for some period of time. And so the defense sort of boxed itself up in a way because the version of events that they want the jury to believe necessitates believing that Michael Cohen was a truth teller for some period of time. And of course, that switch is intelligible, right? Michael Cohen didn't trust Bob Costello, and so he gave him a version of events that he felt was safe, even though it was not the truth, as he testified he knew at the time, and it didn't continue to be what Michael Cohen said once he decided to cooperate. But I thought the defense had a little bit of a rough morning. I think what the true measure of today will be, Jose, and I apologize, we are seeing Trump's surrogates move in all around us, going back to the courthouse and also moving back to the protest park right behind us as we speak. But I think the true test for the defense will be today when we have our charging conference on the jury instructions, because in large part of what will determine whether this case succeeds from the prosecution's standpoint is whether they can obtain jury instructions that allow the jury to understand what happened here in terms that are beneficial to the prosecution. I'll give you one example. The statute here that deals with falsification of business records will hold Trump criminally liable either if he falsified the records himself or he caused somebody else to falsify them. But the definition of the word cause is very much at issue, and the jury's going to have some instruction on what it means to cause somebody else to do it. Does it mean that you actually tell someone to do it, or that it's reasonably foreseeable to them based on other actions that you took, that the business records could sort of evolve in a particular direction? It's that latter instruction that the DA's office wants. If they get it, they come closer to being able to win this case. So let's see how the defense does this afternoon in what will be a dry and not particularly sexy proceeding, but absolutely essential from a legal one.
Lisa Rubin, Suzanne Craig, thank you both so very much.
Up next, our legal panel is going to analyze just how effective the prosecution and the defense were.
We are back in just 90 seconds. You're watching special coverage of Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial on MSNBC.